Imagine yourself in 1850 San Francisco. There's dirt streets, there's wooden buildings, and there's chickens pecking at the ground. And this is the age of infectious disease. People are regularly dying from illnesses that we mostly take for granted, like pneumonia and tuberculosis. And this is a world where relatively normal things become a lot scarier. Imagine childbirth. That becomes a real gamble. Something like a C-section or a kidney transplant is a sheer impossibility. And if you get a cut on your arm, you're not talking about antibiotics. You're talking about amputation. And you know what life expectancy was in 1850? 40. It's pretty scary. And unfortunately, we're actually re-entering that world because we're wasting our antibiotics. With each passing year, we're living in a slow-motion pandemic where our antibiotics are becoming much and much less effective. And the scary part to me is that we actually think this is a problem with our healthcare system, when actually, it's a problem with our food system. But before I talk about our food system, let's talk about antibiotic resistance. So, what are we looking at here? It's pretty gross, right? This is my partner's tonsils when she has strep throat. And she tells me it's so painful that she feels like she's swallowing shattered glass. So if anyone's swallowing right now, just appreciate how normal it feels. It's pretty gross. I'll move forward. But she's had strep throat often enough in her life that the bacteria she carries have become resistant to normal antibiotics. And so every time that she gets strep throat, she has to get more powerful antibiotics, which is fine. We, as a society, have several levels of increasingly more powerful antibiotics. But what happens if the bacteria becomes resistant to those? Then she would simply be left swallowing shattered glass with no cure. And unfortunately, this is not just her and her strep throat. This happens to all number of illnesses. This is everything from UTIs to pneumonia to strep throat to meningitis, E. coli, and it can happen to any of us. It can happen to you, it can happen to me, friends, elderly, loved ones. And unfortunately, like I said, there's a little bit of a misleading narrative around this. We think and we talk about it as if it's a healthcare problem. We spin up a story that goes something like this. You get sick, so you go to the doctor. And the doctor gives you some antibiotics, and you start to take them for a few days, and you start to feel better. So you stop taking them. Or you got prescribed them in the wrong place in the first place, or you live in a country where you don't actually need a prescription. And as we learned, again, you're going to kill 99% of the bacteria, but 1% survives. And we know that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so that 1% that survives, it's the strongest bacteria. It's the super strep throat. And that's so much more dangerous. It's the stuff that's really going to mess you up. And the problem is, that narrative about the healthcare system, it kind of misses the point. Because it turns out that we use 70% of our antibiotics on animals that we eat for food. And so I want to take you into the life of a traditional such animal. We'll call him Porky. He's pretty cute, right? And so Porky is a traditional industrially farmed pig. And unfortunately, he has a pretty stressful life. He was castrated right after birth without anesthetic. And then his tail was chopped off to stop the other pigs from biting at it. And so he's stressed. His immune system is shot. You know how your immune system sort of falls apart when you're stressed? And right then, he's tossed out into the big, nasty world. And this big, nasty world is just a gross place. It's a big, dank warehouse. It's dark. It's filled with 2,000 pigs, and there's feces on the floor. There's disease at every turn. And so Porky's going to get sick, right? But the industrial farms know this. And so Porky would get sick if they weren't packing him full of 5 different types of antibiotics already. And these antibiotics, ultimately, we're using them incorrectly. We're using them not to treat disease, but to prevent disease in our food system. Because the easiest solution to this isn't better treatment, it's drugs. And it turns out that these drugs, these antibiotics, actually help these animals grow much faster than they otherwise would. So Porky's out there packing on pounds at an unnatural rate, and that's a win for the factory farms. But it's a loss for everyone else. And there's three main problems. The first is that these are human antibiotics. These are important drugs that you and I would use. And so it's not like there's a separate class of pig antibiotics that they're using. The second is that these are multiple antibiotics. And so when Porky becomes resistant to one of them, the bacteria becomes resistant to all of them, which is so much more dangerous. And finally, it's the sheer scale. Every year, we raise and kill about 100 billion land animals for food every year. And so the way that I think about this is like 100 billion miniature laboratories that are just racing around 24/7, furiously working to overcome our best antibiotic weapons. And so it's simply inevitable, given the sheer scale, that they're going to succeed. And we're already starting to see it happen. Many of our best life-saving drugs, like our penicillin, our erythromycin, our tetracyclines, our fluoroquinolones, are already becoming vastly less effective than they were even just a decade ago. And this isn't just strep throat. It's not just my partner. It's 1 million people who die every year because of antibiotic resistance. And by 2050, that's going to be 10 million people. And these are preventable deaths. Like, we created this system. But we can also fix the system. And there's a few things that we can do. The first thing is we can vote. We can vote in favor of these small family farms instead of these nasty industrial farms. We can also vote with our dollars. Whenever you're shopping for meat, check out something that has organic label or an antibiotic-free label. Or try a plant-based alternative that has 0 antibiotics. And finally, did anyone learn something new today? I'm glad to see it. Well, I certainly did when I first learned about this. And so I joined the board of an animal research nonprofit that's working on these issues. And I frankly think that we just don't talk enough about this as a society. So now that we know a little bit more about the real cause of antibiotic resistance, let's talk about it. Let's spread the word. So I know that this has been a bit bleak. We've talked about antibiotic resistance, we've talked about strep throat, we talked about poor Porky, if you remember him. And this is a big problem. It's involving public health, it involves the medicine system, and it involves our agricultural system. But we've tackled big problems like this before. So instead of thinking about the 1850s, let's turn our attention to the 2050s. And let's think about how we can create a world where our antibiotics still work for us instead of against us. Thank you.